The locks all thunked down at once, 4 of them, while we were still doing 30. "Don't reach for the door," the driver said. His voice had gone flat and low, nothing like the man who'd been talking about the Steelers 2 minutes earlier. His eyes were fixed on something through the windshield, half a block up, where my building sat under its one working streetlight. "When I stop, you run. Not back the way we came. You run up the hill, you don't look back, and you don't stop till you're somewhere with people. You understand me?" "What? Stop where?" "That's my building right there, I know it's your building." He didn't slow down. If anything, we sped up, the engine pulling harder as we closed the distance. "That's the problem. Look. But don't make it obvious you're looking." So I looked. 3 men stood near the entrance to my building, not walking past, not waiting for a ride. Standing, spread out, the way you'd stand if you were covering a doorway, one by the steps, one by the alley, one leaning against a dark SUV at the curb with its engine running and its lights off. And as our headlights swept across them, the one by the steps turned his face toward the car, and my whole body went cold, because I knew him. He'd come to my door 4 days ago, asking for someone who didn't live there. If stories about the night a total stranger decided your life was worth more than his shift are the kind you can't look away from, take 1 second and subscribe right now, because what this driver did in the next 4 minutes is the only reason I'm here to tell it, and somebody scrolling past needs to know these stories don't always end the way the news makes you think. That's the only thing I'll ask. Now let me back up to the start of that night, because to understand why 3 men were waiting at my door for a woman I'd never been, you have to know about the apartment I'd gotten for a suspiciously good price. My name is Cora. I'm 27, and I work as a sous chef at a farm-to-table place in Pittsburgh, the kind of restaurant with a tasting menu and tweezers and a Saturday night that doesn't end until the last cook has scraped down the last station around 1 in the morning. It's a hard, hot, beautiful job, and I love it, and it leaves me wrung out like a dish rag 6 nights a week. That particular Saturday had been brutal. A full book plus a private party. And when we finally broke down the kitchen, the whole crew went around the corner for a couple of beers. The way you do when your body is still vibrating from service and you can't just go straight to sleep. 2 beers in, I knew I wasn't driving. My car's a temperamental old thing anyway, more suggestion than transportation. So I'd left it at the restaurant and pulled up the app to get a ride home. Standard. I take an Uber home most weekend nights. You don't think twice about it. That's the whole thing about how this happened, really. None of it required me to do anything unusual. I just did the ordinary thing, the thing I'd done 100 times, and the ordinary thing walked me straight toward those 3 men. The crew had wanted me to stay for a 3rd round. Service had been a war that night, and we'd won it. And there's a particular high that comes off a kitchen at the end of a perfect, brutal Saturday. Everybody loose and laughing and reeking of fryer oil and victory. Part of me wanted to stay in it, but my feet were screaming and my eyes were sandpaper, so I hugged the line cooks and waved off the 3rd beer and stepped out into the cold to wait for my car. And I have thought 100 times since about how close I came to staying, and how a 3rd beer might have changed which minute I left, and which driver the app sent, and whether the man it would have sent would have looked up at the right second the way Omar did. You can drive yourself out of your mind on those what-ifs. I try not to anymore. The driver who accepted was named Omar. Older guy, maybe mid-40s, big hands on the wheel, a little plastic hula dancer on the dash that I remember staring at later like it was the most important object in the world. He drove a clean Camry that smelled like pine and somebody's home cooking, and there was a travel mug in the cup holder and a paperback wedged into the door pocket, the small evidence of a man who basically lived in his car. When I got in, he asked if I'd had a good night, and I said, "Long night," and he laughed and said, "Those are sometimes the good ones." And we talked about football in the bridges and how nobody who isn't from Pittsburgh can drive in Pittsburgh. Easy, comfortable. He told me he'd been driving the city since before the app existed, back when it was real cabs and a radio dispatcher, and that nights were his shift because his wife worked days and somebody had to be home for their kid after school. The kind of 15-minute nothing conversation that makes a city feel like a small town. I keep that part of the night carefully, the easy part, because it's proof that the man who saved my life was 90 seconds earlier, just a tired dad telling a stranger about his kid. Heroes don't announce themselves. They're usually just whoever happened to be paying attention. I want to tell you about the apartment now, because it's the thing under everything. 3 weeks before that night, I'd moved into a 1-bedroom in a part of town that was slowly getting nicer, the kind of building where half the units were renovated and half still had the old radiators. I'd found it through a sublet listing, furnished, available immediately, and priced about $300 a month under everything else I'd seen. The woman handling it over text said the previous tenant had left in a hurry, family emergency, didn't need the furniture, just wanted someone reliable in there fast. I jumped on it. In this market, you don't ask a lot of questions when a furnished one-bedroom comes in 300 under. You sign. The previous tenant's name was Vera. I knew that because her name was still on a lot of things. Her name was still on the buzzer panel downstairs, a little strip of label tape I kept meaning to replace. Her mail still came, a steady trickle of it, catalogs and bank envelopes, and once something from a law office that I stacked in a growing pile on the entry table, figuring she'd send for it or the post office would sort it out. A food delivery showed up once that I hadn't ordered, for her, and I told the confused driver there was a mix-up and he shrugged and left it. The building's online resident directory still listed 4B under her name, and I'd submitted 3 requests to get it changed to mine that all went into some property management void. Little things. Loose ends from somebody else's life. The kind you inherit when you move into a space someone left fast. I didn't think about them as connected to anything. Why would I? The phone calls were probably the strangest, looking back. Twice in those first weeks, the building's front buzzer went off late, and when I answered it through the crackly intercom, a man's voice asked for Vera. And when I said, "Wrong apartment?" he didn't apologize or hang up right away. He just breathed for a second, and then the line went dead. I figured it was an ex. Everybody's got an ex who can't read a moved-out sign. There was also the matter of the law office envelope, thick, certified-looking, addressed to Vera Lindquist, that I'd held up to the light one bored evening and then felt guilty about and set back on the pile. And the upstairs neighbor, an older man who watered the hallway plants nobody else claimed, had stopped me by the mailboxes my first week and said, "You're in 4B now? Good." That girl had some characters coming around. "Glad it's a nice young lady." I'd smiled and said something polite and filed it under old man chatter. Characters coming around, he told me, in his way, on day 3. I just didn't have the ears to hear it, because nothing about a cheap apartment and a neighbor's small talk arrives wearing a warning label. 4 days before the Uber, a man knocked on my door at 9 in the evening. I almost didn't answer, because nobody good knocks at 9, but the peephole showed an ordinary-looking guy, 30s, polo shirt, holding his phone like he was checking an address. He looked like somebody's cousin. He looked like a guy who sells you a phone plan, so I opened it on the chain. He smiled and asked, real friendly, if Vera was home. "There's no Vera here," I said. "I think she moved out. I just took over the place." The smile stayed on his mouth, but it left his eyes completely. He looked past me, into the apartment, at the furniture that had come with the place, Vera's furniture, and something moved across his face that I didn't have a name for at the time and have plenty of names for now. His gaze went slow around what he could see of the room, the couch, the lamp, the little shelf, cataloging it, and I realized later he was confirming it was still her apartment, still her things, which to him meant still her. "When'd she move out?" he asked. "I don't know. A few weeks before I got here, I think. I never met her." "You got a forwarding address? Anything? A phone, an email, anybody who'd know where she went?" Too many questions, too specific, asked too evenly. The friendliness stretched thin as plastic wrap over something with edges. "No, sorry." And because the way he was looking past me into the apartment had started to make my skin feel wrong, I added, "I should go." And I closed the door, and I heard him stand there on the other side of it for a good 10 seconds, not knocking, not leaving, just standing, before his footsteps finally went away down the hall. I threw the deadbolt after he left, which I almost never bothered with, and I stood with my hand flat on the door for a minute without knowing why. I told my coworker about it the next day as a weird guy story. A man came looking for the old tenant, gave me the creeps, whatever. She said landlords should really scrub that stuff when people move. I agreed. We moved on. I did not think about it again until 4 nights later, when our headlights swept across his face standing at my door with 2 other men and a running SUV. "That's the guy," I said in the Uber, and my voice came out strange and small. "Omar, that's the guy who came to my door. He was looking for—" "Get your shoes ready," Omar said, both feet flat on the floor. "When I say go, you go." What had tipped him, he told the police later, was nothing dramatic. It was the way they were standing. People waiting for a ride lean on the building or stare at their phones. People saying goodnight to a friend face each other. These 3 weren't doing any of that. They were arranged. One near the steps with a clear line to the door, one back by the mouth of the alley where a person might bolt, one at the SUV with the engine already running, and not a single phone screen glowing among them at 1 in the morning, which Omar said was the thing that turned his stomach, because everybody waiting for anything in this century is looking at a phone, and men who aren't looking at their phones are looking for something else. We were almost level with the building now. The man on the steps had pushed off and was walking toward the curb, toward where a car would naturally stop to let someone out, and his hand was doing something at his waistband, and the man by the SUV had opened the driver's door, and the third had started across the sidewalk to flank, and the whole choreography of it was suddenly, sickeningly clear even to me, a tired sous chef who'd never seen anything like it outside a screen. They were not there to talk. They had positioned themselves around a spot where a car drops off a passenger, and they were waiting for that car to be mine. The locks under their thunk made horrible sense now. He hadn't locked me in. He'd locked them out, and he'd done it before I ever understood there was anything to lock out. Omar did not stop. He kept the Camry at a steady speed, didn't brake, didn't swerve, just sailed right past my building like it was any other building on any other street, past the man stepping toward the curb who had to pull up short, his face turning to follow us, confusion cracking through whatever he'd been about to do. For 1/2 second, I saw him clearly through the side window, close enough to see him register that the car wasn't stopping, that the plan had a hole in it, and then we were past. And Omar's foot came down, and the engine surged, and Pittsburgh started flying by. "Phone," Omar said. "Call 911. Tell them you're in a moving vehicle, give them my plate, it's on the app, and tell them men were waiting to grab a woman at your address and you're being followed. Because we are about to be followed." In the side mirror, the SUV's headlights flared on. I have never made a phone call like that one. Crouched sideways in the back seat of a stranger's Camry, watching headlights swing out into the street behind us and accelerate, reading Omar's license plate off the glowing phone screen with a voice that didn't sound like mine, while a dispatcher asked me calm, clear questions and I tried to give calm, clear answers, and mostly succeeded, which I credit entirely to 8 years of staying functional during kitchen fires, both real and metaphorical. You learn, in a professional kitchen, to keep your hands working while your heart is somewhere up around the ceiling. That skill, it turns out, transfers. "Ma'am, are you safe right now?" the dispatcher asked, and I almost laughed, because what a question. And instead I said no, not yet. And she said, "Okay, stay with me. Are you injured?" And I said no. And she said, "Good. That's good. What direction are you traveling?" And the steadiness of her, the sheer ordinary competence of a woman doing her job at 1 in the morning, became a rope I held with both hands. I narrated the chase to her like a play-by-play I didn't want to be calling. "They're closing. They're falling back. We turned, I don't know the street." "Omar, what street?" "He says it doesn't matter. We're going to the North Side station." She typed it all somewhere. Units were moving. Helping was already happening, out there in the dark, because of a phone call and a license plate and a stranger who decided not to stop. "They're behind us," I told her. "Dark SUV, no plate I can see. They pulled out right after we passed. We're heading Omar." "Where are we heading?" "Tell them I'm taking 28 toward the station on the north side, the one with the lot out front. Tell them I am not going to stop until I see uniforms." Omar drove like a man who had thought about this before, not recklessly. That's the thing I keep coming back to. He wasn't fast and panicked. He was fast and deliberate, taking the turn smooth so I didn't go flying. Timing 2 yellow lights so the SUV had to choose between running a red into cross traffic or losing a few seconds, and they chose to brake, and we got a few seconds. He talked the whole time, low and steady, partly to me and partly to himself. Okay. They don't want a chase. A chase is bad for them. Too many cameras, too many cops. They wanted you quiet, at a curb, in and gone. Now it's loud. Loud is good for us. We stay loud. A glance in the mirror. They're hanging back. They're deciding if you're worth it. We're gonna make sure the answer's no. The SUV closed the gap on a straightaway, big engine eating the distance, headlights swelling in the back glass until the whole inside of the Camry lit up white, and I heard myself make a sound I'd never made before. Omar didn't flinch. He let them get close enough that I could see 2 shapes in the front seats, and then at the last second he took a hard right down a side street he clearly knew, a narrow one lined with parked cars, where their bigger vehicle couldn't ride up beside us, no matter how badly they wanted to. We threaded it at a speed that should have scared me more than the men did. The SUV had to slow to fit, and slowing was losing. And Omar came out the far end and cut left across an empty intersection, and we bought another block. Pittsburgh, he said, almost to himself, almost fond. You want to lose somebody? You do it in Pittsburgh. Towns all hills and one-ways and bridges that don't go where you think. 40 years I've driven this. They've got the bigger engine. I've got the map in my head. A bridge came up, one of the yellow ones, and he took it, and halfway across I twisted around and saw the SUV make the bridge behind us, still there, dogged, and my stomach dropped all over again. They're still coming. Let them come. Bridge has a camera every 100 feet, and a cop sits at the far end most nights writing tickets. The longer they follow, the more of them ends up on a hard drive somewhere. They know it. Watch. And sure enough, on the far side, where the road split 3 ways under a tangle of signs that would baffle anyone who hadn't lived here, Omar took the least obvious fork without slowing, and the SUV hesitated at the split, just for a beat, just long enough. And when I looked again, it had committed to the wrong direction, and the gap between us yawned open and kept opening. Are they gone? My hands were cramped around the phone. The dispatcher was still in my ear, asking for cross streets I couldn't always supply. Not gone. Behind. Different things. Omar's eyes flicked between the mirror and the road. We don't celebrate till we're standing in the light. Tell the lady on the phone we're 2 minutes out. Tell her to have somebody at the door. 2 minutes has never lasted so long. I called out the streets as we passed them, the dispatcher relaying, the city blurring by in sodium orange streaks. And the whole time some animal part of my brain kept waiting for those white headlights to come roaring back out of a side street and end us. They didn't. Omar had driven us clean out of their reach, using nothing but a Camry and the inside of his own head. 4 decades of this city folded up behind his eyes like a map only he could read. Why me? The question came out of me like a sob. I don't know those people. Why are they waiting for me? I don't know, miss, Omar said. But I drove a woman from that exact building about a month ago, late, with 2 suitcases, to the bus station, and she spent the whole ride watching out the back window, just like you're doing now. So whatever this is, it's bigger than tonight, and it's not yours, and right now none of that matters. Right now we just get you to the lights. The words landed wrong and then landed right. A woman with 2 suitcases, the same building, watching the back window. He'd driven Vera. A month ago, in the dark, this same man with the same hula dancer on the dash had carried the woman whose mail I'd been stacking on my entry table out of her old life and toward a bus. And now, by a coincidence so large it stops feeling like coincidence, he'd been sent to carry the stranger who'd moved into the hole she left. I didn't understand any of it yet. Not the why, not the who. I just understood, in that overheated moment with the city tearing past, that I was standing in the middle of somebody else's story, and the somebody else had run for her life out of the very rooms where I'd been sleeping for 3 weeks. What did she look like? I asked, though I think I already knew. Omar's eyes met mine in the mirror for half a second. Like you, he said quietly. Enough like you. I thought it was you when I pulled up. For a second I thought I was picking up the same scared girl twice. Then his eyes went back to the road, and he didn't say anything else about it, and neither did I, because there wasn't anything to say to a thing that large. We came down off the ramp onto the north side, and the streets opened up, and there ahead, glowing like the best thing I'd ever seen, was the police station with its lot out front, and 2 cruisers parked at angles by the door, and a cluster of light that meant people, witnesses, cameras, the loud public safety that predators can't work in. Omar pulled straight in and stopped the car directly between the 2 cruisers, threw it in park, and laid on the horn, one long blast, until an officer came out the front door squinting. The SUV did not follow us into the lot. I watched it slow at the intersection a block back, sit for a moment at the edge of all that light, headlights pointed at us like 2 flat eyes deciding, and then turn off and disappear into the dark grid of the north side. Gone. The way they go when the math stops working for them. No screech, no drama. Just a quiet calculation that the cost had gotten too high, and a left turn into somebody else's night. I started shaking so hard I couldn't get my seatbelt off. The adrenaline that had kept me reading license plates and calling out cross streets drained out all at once and left me useless, fingers fumbling at the buckle, teeth actually chattering in a warm car. Omar reached back between the seats, not to grab me, just to put one big steady hand near my shoulder. Not touching, just there. And he said, You did good. You did everything right. We're at the lights now. You're at the lights. He said it twice more while the officer crossed the lot toward us, like a thing you repeat to a kid after a nightmare. You're at the lights. You're at the lights. I have never in my life been so grateful for two ugly fluorescent-lit cruisers and a cop squinting at a car horn going off at 1 in the morning. When the officer leaned down to the window, Omar didn't say, "This lady thinks she's in trouble." He said, "3 men set up a snatch at her building. We were followed by a dark SUV. Partial plates in my phone, and you need to get a car to that address before they decide to wait for her to come home." Crisp. Complete. The officer's whole posture changed. Within a minute, there were 2 more of them, and somebody was walking me inside with a hand between my shoulder blades, and the night tipped over from the worst thing that had ever happened to me into the slow, boring, blessed machinery of being safe. They sat me in a room with a blanket and a vending machine hot chocolate I never drank. And the strangest thing happened, which is that with the danger gone, my body decided to fall apart on a delay. I'd been so steady in the car, so functional, plate numbers and cross streets, and now, safe, surrounded by police, I couldn't hold the cup without it rattling against the table. A young officer sat with me and didn't try to fix it, just talked about nothing, the penguins, the weather coming, while my system slowly came down off a height it was never built to reach. Somewhere out the window, the sky started going the gray of very early morning. I called my boss at 5 and left a rambling voicemail about not making prep, and called my sister, who didn't ask a single question before grabbing her keys. Outside that little room, a whole quiet operation was already turning over. Cars dispatched to my building, footage being pulled, a detective being woken, all of it set in motion by one driver's refusal to do the easy thing and let me out at my own front door. The hours after blur together. A conference room with bad coffee. Officers, then a detective. A tired woman with kind eyes and a notepad she filled 3 times over. Me repeating the story. The man at my door 4 days ago. The name Vera, the furnished apartment 300 under market, the mail, the buzzer, the food delivery for a stranger, the late-night buzzes from a man who only breathed. My sister arrived around 3, hair wild, having driven across the city in pajama pants, and sat with her arm locked around me while I gave the same answers for the 4th time. Omar in the next room giving his own statement, the bus station, the woman with the suitcases, the way he'd read the men at the curb. They ran the partial plate Omar had caught in his mirror against the cameras near my building and the bridge, and somewhere in the gray early morning, the pieces started locking together into a picture that made the back of my neck crawl. Vera Lindqvist had lived in 4B for 2 years. She'd been the girlfriend, and for a while the unofficial bookkeeper, of a man who ran a cash lending operation that was exactly as ugly as it sounds, the kind that lends to people who can't go to banks and collects in ways banks aren't allowed to. When that relationship went bad, the detective explained, Vera had done 2 smart and dangerous things. She'd copied a hard drive's worth of records that could put the man and several others in prison, and she'd run, fast and quiet, the night she understood that staying meant disappearing the permanent way. The records were her insurance, the only thing keeping her breathing from a distance, and the man hunting her wanted them back more than he'd ever wanted Vera herself. A woman you can replace. A hard drive full of your crimes you cannot. Here's the part that nearly killed me. The part I want you to really hear. They didn't know Vera was gone, or they refused to believe it. She'd left in a hurry and left the trail intact, her name on the buzzer, the mail, the directory, the apps, all of it still pointing at apartment 4B like a lit arrow over a target. To the people hunting her, that address was Vera. And when a woman in her late 20s, brown hair, about Vera's height and build, started coming and going from 4B at odd restaurant hours, they didn't see a sous chef who'd signed a sublet. They saw Vera. They saw their target pretending to be someone new, hiding in plain sight in her own old apartment, telling a clumsy little lie about having moved out. The polo shirt man at my door hadn't believed one word, I said. He'd looked past me at her furniture and decided I was her, and he'd gone back and reported that Vera was still in 4B and getting cocky, and they'd come 4 nights later to take her, and the insurance, somewhere quiet where breathing was optional. I had inherited a dead woman's danger along with her couch, except Vera wasn't dead. Vera was, last anyone knew, alive and far away and still running, which is its own kind of awful to sit with. I just happened to be the stranger standing on the X she'd left behind, close enough in the dark and on paper to get mistaken for her by men who'd never seen either of our faces up close. It got handled, In the slow, grinding way the real world handles things. The partial plate and the bridge cameras and a tip from the detective's organized crime contacts put names to the three men. Two were picked up within the week. One of them, the polo shirt man, who I had to pick out of a photo array with my hand shaking over the table. The man giving the orders is a longer story and a slower one, the kind that involves the kind of agencies that don't send you updates. And last I heard, the case was still crawling forward on the strength of all things, the records Vera took, which surfaced somewhere safe and started doing the work she'd bled to keep them able to do. I like to think she's all right, wherever she is. I have no way to know. We never met. We will almost certainly never meet. And yet I lived in her rooms and got mistaken for her by men who meant her harm and got chased across a city in her place, and there is no word for what that makes us to each other. I never slept in that apartment again. Couldn't. Not with Vera's couch and Vera's lamps and her name still ghosting around the buzzer panel like a curse with my face on it. I broke the sublet, ate the deposit, and moved in with my sister for 2 months while my hands stopped doing the thing they'd started doing whenever a car slowed down near me on the sidewalk. Eventually, I found a new place, under my own name, which I now guard like a state secret. And the first thing I did when I got the keys was stand in the lobby and read every name on every buzzer and mailbox until I was satisfied that nobody who used to live in my unit had left a single thread behind. Omar, I saw exactly once more, a few weeks later, when the detective arranged for us both to come sign something. I tried to thank him properly, and I had this whole speech rehearsed, and he waved it off the way men like him wave off things that embarrass them. "You'd have done the same," he said, which wasn't true because I wouldn't have known how, but I let him have it. He told me he'd switched to driving days only after that night, that the night shift had finally cost him a little more than he wanted to pay. Then he got into his clean Camry with the hula dancer on the dash and pulled out into an ordinary gray afternoon, just a tired dad heading home to be there when his kid got off the bus. And that was the last I ever saw of him. I never even got his last name. I think about him more than he will ever know. So here's what I've carried out of that night, and it isn't what you'd think. For weeks afterward, I kept trying to find the moment I should have caught it. The cheap rent, the mail, the man at the door. And people kept telling me I should have trusted my instincts, should have felt that something was wrong. But that's the thing. That's what I need you to understand. There was nothing to feel. A good price on an apartment doesn't feel like a threat. A stranger's catalogs in your mailbox don't feel like a threat. A wrong address food delivery doesn't feel like a threat. Each piece was so small and so ordinary that no instinct on earth would have flagged it, and that's exactly how the danger reached me. Not through one big obvious warning, but through a dozen tiny administrative leftovers from a life I never lived. We move into spaces other people leave. We take over their phone numbers and their addresses and their apartments and their old furniture, and we inherit, without ever knowing it, the loose threads of who they were and what they were running from. A name on a buzzer is not nothing. Mail for a stranger is not nothing. The systems that connect all of us, the apps and the directories and the delivery routes and the credit checks, they don't know you swapped your life for someone else's at that address. They just keep pointing at the door, patient and stupid and accurate, long after the person they're pointing at is gone. I'd treated all of it as clutter. Somebody else's junk mail to recycle, somebody else's name to eventually get around to fixing, somebody else's ex who couldn't read a moved-out sign. I never once added it up, because none of the pieces were scary on their own, and that's the precise mechanism of how it nearly worked. The threat didn't come dressed as a threat. It came dressed as administrative leftovers, as the small, forgettable residue of a stranger's life, and it sat in my mailbox and on my buzzer for 3 weeks looking exactly like nothing. So the practical thing, the thing I do now and beg the people I love to do, is this. When you move into a life someone left behind, scrub the trail like it matters, because it does. Change the name on every panel and account and listing the first week, not the first year. Return the mail, all of it, marked clearly. Ask the landlord who lived there and why they left so fast, and pay attention to how they answer. Make the address yours, completely, on paper, and in every system you can reach, because somewhere out there might be someone still looking for the person who used to stand where you're standing now, and the only thing between you and the worst night of their search might be a strip of label tape with the wrong name on it. If this one got into your chest, if you've ever moved into a place and found a stranger's mail piling up and felt that little flicker of, weird, then do me one favor and subscribe before you go, because the next person it reaches might be 3 loose threads into someone else's story without knowing it. And tell me down in the comments, What's the strangest thing you ever inherited from a previous tenant? I genuinely want to know. Some of you have a story, and somebody needs to hear it.